Hi, Bookaholics. This is Deirdre Pippins, the queen of Bookaholics. Now, what would you do if a mysterious voice started speaking to you and telling you its story? Wow. Well, if you're Lynnda Pollio, you would write a book called Trusting the Currents. Stay tuned as we talk to Lynnda about this spiritually involved book coming from beyond. Hi, Lynnda.
Hi, Deidre. Very happy to be talking with you.
Yes, I am so glad to be talking to you as well. I'm meeting so many interesting writers on this path, and you have a very unique story on so many different levels, how it came to you, its genre, all types of things. So we're going to have to take it, I'm going to take it kind of steady and slow because it's a concept that few may find it's hard to grasp. Some may even be, I'm sure you face some people that's even in a little disbelief. But let's just dive right in
Thank you.
and talk about the first talking point of how did you get here to be a writer? Because I read that you were I think a New York advertising executive, and that sounds very high flying, and you seem to have been very successful. You
hmm
know, you were on a probably, I would say, a dream career track that we used to view of maybe say like the 90s or early 2000s. That was
hmm
a kind of dream career track, being a high flying ad executive in New York. Of course, now we know, especially after the pandemic, that kind of career track has changed. But you were before your time a little bit with this whole evolvement
Always.
of your career. So, what happened? How did you get from being an advertising exec to now a writer and a spiritual one at that?
Well, I've always had a very strong spiritual component to my life. From the time I was born, the first thing that I wanted to be when I was little was a nun.
I saw that.
From like 5 years old, and an artist. Those were my two kind of things I wanted to be, and I didn't
Right.
really become either, but I'm a little of both still because I've held on to that spiritual component of me through my entire life. I mean, it's kind of waxed and waned under the years
Okay.
because over the years because it's hard to hold on to a really meaningful spiritual life when you have to live in the world and live in the corporate
Exactly.
world and live with people that are not that way. So but that was always in me,
Right.
and then I went into advertising, and I literally stumbled into it. It was not something I planned on. I never had this great career path. I was just good at things, and when I was good at them I did them. And so advertising was easy for me because it was creative, because I was a creative
Yes.
person.
Yes.
It didn't have a lot of structure at the time. I could come in at 10 o'clock in the morning. They didn't care what your hours were as long as you did your job. So, and I was good at, I ran business development for ad agencies, which I did very well.
Mhm.
And I did it for companies for a while, but I'm very independent by nature. So I became a consultant, and I did a lot of new business consulting. And then I ended up taking care of my father for a year. I hadn't seen him in 17 years because he was an alcoholic, and
Yeah.
we kind of broke in the family. And it was 17 years that I had no contact with him. And then my uncle called and said, "Your father's had a heart attack. He's dying. Do you want to see him before he dies?"
Right.
And I said yes. And I went to Pennsylvania where he was, and walked in, and he was unconscious. And I had to sign all these do not resuscitate orders. But by then I had been working with spiritual energies. I work with Reiki and therapeutic touch and a lot of other energetic therapies. So I started doing energy work on him. And in about a month, he came out of it. And he
Okay.
said to me, "I just want one more year with you kids to make up for, what our childhood was like. So I took care of him that next year of his life, which was difficult. And in the process, I really tried pulling all the wounds of the family back together again, because we were very fragmented. Anyone who's grown up with an alcoholic parent knows that it kind of fragments the rest of the family as well.
Right.
So I pulled that together, and my father died in a hospice, a VA hospice in Pennsylvania. And when I was leaving the hospice, there was a book on a bench, and it was The Call of the Canyon by Zane Grey, which I had never heard of before, but I just threw it in the back seat of my car. I drove home crying the whole way.
Yes.
About 3 days later, I was getting up in the morning, and I heard a voice say, "Go to Sedona." And I had heard of Sedona, which is in Arizona, but I had never been there before. So I walked out and I told my husband, I'm going to Sedona. And he said,
Right.
"Where's that?" And I said, "It's in Arizona." So 3 weeks later, I was on a plane. I had nowhere to stay. I didn't know what I was going for, how long I was staying for. And I stayed for 5 months. And in those 5 months, in typical Sedona fashion, I had all kinds of mystical experiences, which really kind of reawakened me to my childhood. I think many of us have these sort of interesting spiritual lives when we're children, and they kind of get taught out of us by culture and school and family. And so that sort of reawakened me. I spent 5 months and had all kinds of experiences, came back and realized that I could never go back into the corporate world as it was. So I then started working with consciousness within corporations, and I became one of the sort of beginning thought leaders in the idea of integrating consciousness. And for me, it was the human technologies of wisdom, intuition, compassion, empathy, forgiveness, and gratitude into corporate culture.
Right.
So I did that for a number of years. And then one day I am working on a project. I was consulting at the time. I had no intention of writing a book. And if you had told me I was going to write a book, let alone a novel, I would have told you you were crazy.
Wow.
But all of a sudden, I heard the voice of an old Black Southern woman standing next to me. And all she said to me, her first words were, "It's not what happened to me that matters." But it was such a shocking experience for me because it felt so real that I just wrote the sentence down and I sat there. And then she continued speaking, but this time it wasn't from the outside. It was in my head, but it was her voice. It was a very clear Black Southern voice. So I just wrote the next couple paragraphs. She went away. A couple days later, she came back and I began writing what she wanted me to write. She told me she wanted me to tell her story. I was doing a lot of high knowledge channeling. I've always channeled high knowledge. I've never heard a voice before, and I've never heard a voice since, but it was an actual voice. And so I knew who she was every time she came because she was very distinct from me.
Wow. Now, okay, so like I said, for the audience, I'm going to break this down because,
Sure.
again, this can be a very difficult concept to embrace, that type of thing. So, starting back, and I read this last night about your father and your journey and your family's journey with your father in his last year of life, which I thought was so giving of you and your brothers, I believe. And I think maybe all of you, and some of your family members probably said, and I think they said, "Oh, he doesn't deserve this kind of kindness and treatment and
Yeah, it
forgiveness."
took a while for people to kind
Yes.
of, move into that forgiveness stage.
Right, yes, because once someone hurts the family like that, it's kind of hard to forgive them, but people
Yes.
do change. And so your father was evolving, and I'm sure that was a kind of, I won't say necessarily religious, but spiritual thing for you. So as you embraced your father in his last year of life and the forgiveness track, do you think that had a lot to do when you were already channeling? You said you were already channeling.
Yes, I've always, from the time I was a kid, I've always had, I refer to it as high knowledge because it was
Yeah,
always out of the heart. It was always heart-based information to help other people.
right.
And very sort of prognostic things. I would see things that were coming for people, but it was always about how they can best move forward in their lives, but using their heart.
Right. So I think when you put what you've been channeling for a while into your own father, I think that carried you to the next level. That prepared you for the next level for this experience
That's true.
from with this voice. That's what I felt when I was reading that last night. So now a voice, which was not the old woman Southern voice, told you to go to Sedona. That was
Yeah, it
another
was
voice.
just a voice. I was just
Right.
one of these weird, you wake up in the morning, you know how you have these weird kind of morning
Yes.
hypnagogic thing, but it was
Yeah.
3 words and it was very clear, and
Wow.
it was an impulse. It had an
Okay.
impulse to it.
Right.
So and I had heard about it.
Okay.
So I went, and I've learned over the years that, I think spirit speaks to us all the time. But
Yes.
we're so caught up in our lives, we don't listen. And
Right.
it also tells us to do things that make us uncomfortable, that take us out of what we think our safety zone is. So you have to make that leap of faith when you hear a voice of some sort, whether it's your own inner voice or whether it's an external voice telling you. You have to
Yes.
make that decision whether you're going to follow it or not.
Yes. Well, this is quite the sidebar, and I'm not going to, because this is a totally different subject. We would be going around to another path. But I like and many others, they tell you to listen to your gut, just to be colloquial about it, listening to your gut. But our society blocks that so much. We have so much to do. There's so much busyness. Then so much noise out there, TV, social media, our phones. It's so much noise out there. And then added on to the third component, what we are supposed to experience here. And that all gets jumbled up, and you can't really see clearly or feel clearly what you are supposed to really be doing here.
Right.
And so this other stuff blocks out your natural attunement to the universe, I believe, and you
Yeah.
can't always hear. And I think a lot of people come and go and never get a chance to experience the complete fulfillment that you are supposed to experience while you're here.
You have to be able, and it's very difficult now because we're so externally oriented with social media, and it will never come from anything on the outside.
Right,
It always comes from the inside. So
right,
anything that whether it's reading a book or taking a class or meditating or going to church, whatever it does that allows you to sit in silence and go into yourself. And most people are very afraid of going into themselves because that's where
yes,
we hold our trauma. And most of
yes,
our trauma is unconscious from our childhood. And
yes,
we're not in touch with it, and we're
right,
afraid of it. And we don't really have any guidance as to how to really um, sit with it in a way that
yes.
we can both feel it, but not attach to it. And that's the big challenge.
Most definitely. It's because that and what you're saying is so true, because that's why so many people won't even think about dialing the number for a therapist, because they're so afraid of viewing the true inside of them, and they're so afraid of what they may discover, and then they just live, a half step life, or
Right.
whatever you want to term it, or not the full truth of their life.
Well,
So,
Joseph Campbell had a great statement. He said, the cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek.
wow,
And that, I
wow,
think, is the truth. And, it's like anything else. Every major step we make in our life, we are going to be faced with a fear. And if
yes,
we accept the fear, we don't go any further. And if we push through the fear, most of the time, what you experience is nowhere near the experience that you expected to experience with the fear.
yes,
It's the fear is this big hairy monster on the other side of the door, and yet when you have the courage to open the door, you find it's just a mouse.
right. Right. Yes, exactly. And I can kind of relate to what you just said right there, right there. So with that, all of that said, I think that sets the tone, I hope, for any doubting Thomas's naysayers about this story that we're getting ready to dive into, that how a person can face these truths. And really, if you just sit in the quiet, be still and know that I am God, type of thing, that you
Hmm.
can hear and feel the spirit. So then, and I'm not going to say her name, but the elderly voice of a Black woman, a Southern
Hmm.
Black woman, comes to you.
Yes.
And then, so let's talk about that foray
Well,
into,
that first sentence changed the whole course of my life.
wow,
And
that is
she has
unbelievable.
been the most influential person in my life.
Wow.
She has had the most, given me the most guidance, the most wisdom. In fact, just before, I was on with you, I just sort of sat with her and I asked her to be present with us.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
so that, because I feel like everything I do with this book, it wouldn't exist without her. And
Hmm.
she was very compassionate and kind with me. And I don't hear her in the same way that I did when I was channeling the book, but I
Hmm.
do feel her presence when, because, it's not a comfortable thing for me either. I never would have
Yeah.
thought I'm going to write a book about a Black family,
Right.
let alone
Right.
any book, but particularly about this. I mean, I'm not from the South. I'm not African
Right.
American. I don't
Right.
have any really experience. And I know it's, you know, not looked at very well right now,
Right.
but it's the truth, and
Right.
that's all I can stand in. And so I always ask Addie Mae to join me in anything I do with the book, because I know that I feel a very responsibility to her to, she came to me with this story and she felt it was very important for people to read, because it's all about, celebrating our differences and bringing people
Hmm.
together and trusting the currents in life wherever they bring us.
Right.
So I think it's, she's important to every process. It's been a long journey for me. This
Yes.
book has been a
Yes.
total of probably close to 20 years
Yes.
that it's been in the
That was,
making, and it's the most important thing I've ever done, and I feel like I've been put on the planet to do this. So even when
most
I give up, which I did very many times,
yes.
she always comes back to me and brings me a little gift to keep me going.
Wow. And
Yeah.
by gift, what do you mean? Inspiration, hope, tidbit of
you
wisdom, advice?
you ways to talk about the book, people who are
Oh,
interested, a beautiful review. Like, I can't tell
yes.
you how many times I've been like, why
Yes.
am I doing this? This is nuts. It's been a long time. And then I'll get this insane review from a woman who tells me that it gave her hope when she had no hope, you
Wow.
know, and she brings me to places and to people that have meaning to her and to me.
Wow.
So those are the gifts she gives me. She gives me hope.
Wow. Wow. So let's talk a little bit about her. So let's talk about her name and how
Yes.
that all of that evolved.
Yes. Well, Addie Mae, when I first started channeling her, she gave me everyone's name. She gave me Jenny, who is probably my favorite character, who's this mystical, beautiful, biracial cousin of hers. And then there is Uncle Joe, and there's Mama, who is her mother. She gave me every character, and she gave me her last name, Aubrey, right away, but
Yes.
she wouldn't give me her first name, and I kept changing the name for a year, Bertha, Betty, whatever the name was, and it never felt right. And one day I was watching the news, and it was the anniversary of the Birmingham church bombings that murdered the four little girls.
Yes.
And on the television, they had the four photographs of the four little girls, and I was about
Yes.
halfway through the book at this point, and I was writing it in New York. And so as soon as I saw Addie Mae Collins,
Yes.
it was like a jolt to my heart. And I
Oh,
looked at
wow.
Addie Mae Holland and I went, that's her. Like, that's her name. So I named her Addie Mae. And for the rest of the time that I wrote the book, I had a photograph of Addie Mae Collins taped to my computer.
Oh, wow.
And I wrote to her. So she, in some weird way, in my own little wild mind, it was my way of giving not only her, but I think all the four little girls a life.
Yes.
Not that they would have had, but I don't know. They were just present. Particularly Addie Mae was very present to me during that time. And she told me to go back to Sedona. So we went back to Sedona together, me and her. And I spent the last 9 months of writing the first draft. The first draft was totally channeled. I did not have any idea what I was writing. It was stream of consciousness. She
Oh my,
always picked up where she left off.
oh my
I didn't
goodness.
even have it in chapters or nothing. It was just the first draft was just one long diatribe of her speaking. And so we spent the last 9 months in Sedona, and all of the nature plays a huge role in the book as well. And all the nature that I experienced and all the nature that she experienced is all based on my experiences with nature here in Sedona.
Yes, yes.
And Sedona plays a big role, both with me and Addie Mae down the line. So we stayed here for 9 months. And I remember when I wrote the last words, I didn't know I was writing the last words. I didn't know how the book was going to end.
Right, right, right,
So I
right.
wrote the last words, and I knew right away it were the last words. And I burst out crying because, I mean, it was a release. I'd been working on this for a
Yes,
while, and I
yes,
had literally changed my life. I had left my town. I had quit my
yes,
job. I
yes.
had gone on this wild ride that nobody supported me on, by the way. I mean, so,
Wow.
when you really have something that's a calling and a passion, most likely you aren't going to be supported that much. So you really have to believe it. And that's why Addie Mae became my support system, because when I tried to give up, she always gave me something to let me know that she was there. And then I came back to New York after the first draft was finished. And I was so kind of whacked from the experience. And
Mhm.
it was very interesting. And, I kind of hesitated even telling you this, but, I was so attached to her and her family. I mean, they actually,
Yes.
during that period of time, became closer to me than my own family. And when I
Wow.
left them and I came back to New York, I remember, because it's a lot of strong women characters. All the
Mhm.
women characters are really amazing. They're very different, but they're amazing characters.
Right.
And when I came back, I remember walking, down the streets of New York and looking into cafes and seeing groups of Black women friends talking, and like literally putting my nose up against the
Wow.
window, because I felt such an attachment. I knew it wasn't, like normal,
Right.
and that I was passing through something, but I had a very strong attachment, and I still have this really interesting belief system that Black women are really the catalyst and the heart of our global transformation, and
Yes.
by supporting them, we are going to be changing the world in ways that include the heart, because I think the heart is a very
Yes.
important part of the aspect of the transformation. So I put it away for a year because I need to go back to work. I wasn't working. I had no
Right,
money left. So I
right.
put it away. I never expected to publish it. I just felt like I finished this covenant with that. I mean, I felt like Addie Mae and I had a covenant, and the
Yes.
covenant for me was fulfilled. About a year later, she came back to me and said, okay, you need to start editing it now, because the first draft came out in very Southern heavy Black dialect, because I
Yes.
wrote it exactly how I heard it.
Yes.
And I did send it to some people I knew who said it was right, because I was so afraid of offending anyone, but they said it
Right.
was right. But
Right.
still, for it to be digestible by a larger group of people, I needed to put it into a language that was easier. So it took me 8 years.
Oh my goodness.
It
Oh
took
my
me
goodness.
8 years of editing, not only to edit it into, I kept the dialogue in the same voice,
Right.
but the narrative, who was Addie Mae telling her story, I made into it. It was a more digestible way. I kept the voice, but I just made it easier to read.
Yes.
And then it was just a matter of like, what do I do with it now? I mean, I also have, there's three layers to the book. There's Addie Mae's story, which is a coming of age story in the sort of late 1930s rural South.
Okay.
And she's 11 when the book begins, and she's 18 when the book ends.
Oh, okay.
So I kind of put it away, and then she came back to me, and we started working on it again. And after a while, I started thinking, well, maybe this needs to be published. Like
Right.
maybe it wants to be published. But I would tell people about it, and they go, wait a minute, like this is never going to fly. First of all, I'm a middle-aged, first-time spiritual novelist writing
Yes.
from an African American perspective.
Yes. Yes.
On no level is that acceptable.
Yeah. Well, Lynnda, if you recall, the writer of American Dirt, now her name escapes me right now, and then there was another writer, I think her name is Therese Flower, and these are two women that wrote books. I think one woman wrote a book about a Mexican experience, that's the American Dirt.
Okay.
And then the other woman writes an experience of a Black family, and both of them got kind of canceled.
Yeah. And
And
that's,
so
and I understand that. And that's what, and, but I
yeah,
can't, in fact, I had an agent many years ago when I was deciding whether I self-published because it just made more sense. But for a
yeah,
while I was going, maybe I can get an agent and I can have someone do this. He
right.
was a white young guy from William Morris, which was a very big agency.
Yes,
And he came to
yes.
me and he said, I love your book. He said, but can you make all the characters white?
That well, for
Because,
your story, that loses the entire purpose.
well, it was, I think what he felt was because it's not an African American story, it's a human story.
Yes,
And it
yes.
just happens to be all African Americans.
Right,
So,
right,
I could see, he said, well, you can make the whole story. But I said, I can't. I said, I heard her voice. She was
right.
definitely African American, and I could
Yes,
never do that to her. So I said no, and he went bye-bye.
yeah.
But the book has on top of the story of Addie Mae, which is this really meaningful story about this young girl who goes through this transformation, and at the end of and a big part of her transformation is reading.
Okay.
And the next part of her transformation is she really becomes connected to Jenny through her own spirituality. And those two things change the direction of her life.
Yes.
And then there's a second level, which are universal life messages that are woven through the book that anyone can relate to because they're very human experiences. So, I mean, I've had people of all ages, races, nationalities say, I am Addie Mae. I mean, I am Addie Mae
Oh,
should be the
wow.
headline
Wow.
because everyone feels they're connected to Addie Mae. And then the third level
Wow.
is there's an energetic frequency embedded in the writing that brings the reader into their heart. And that was another reason why it took 8 years, because many of the sentences that I was working with, I would work on a sentence for 3 or 4 hours because it had to have a certain cadence to it.
Yes.
And I
Yes.
always tell people, if they're reading the book and they really hit something that talks to them, to
Uh-huh.
read it out loud, because
Oh,
I
that's a
believe that, and I've had a lot of people, mothers and daughters and
mhm.
husbands and wives, read the book aloud to each other
Right.
because it's a very meaningful sort of energetic connection that people can have when they read these things together.
Yes. Wow. That's very interesting. And I'll keep that in mind as I
Hmm.
progress through the book. You know, to go back, why do you think Addie Mae picked you?
Um, I asked her that all the time
Okay.
because I
Okay.
wasn't a writer. I
Yeah.
wasn't Black. I wasn't from the South. I was the least obvious person as far as I was concerned,
Wow.
but I was highly spiritual,
Right.
and I had been my whole life, and I was open. I've always
Okay.
been very non-judgmental.
That makes a big
Um,
difference to
and
be
I've
open.
always been very courageous in following paths that are unusual.
Yes.
So at the end of the book, the book is in 3 parts. There's a prologue,
Yes.
which is basically the story of how the book came to me and my relationship with Addie Mae during the writing of it. And then there's Addie Mae's story, which is the brunt of the book. It's the largest part.
Right.
And then there's a short epilogue, which is really my kind of thinkings about the book after I wrote it and what I got from it. And
Right.
I have in it, when I finished the book, the first draft, and I went up to West Fork, which is very important place for both Addie Mae and I.
Okay.
So
And
we went up there together, and
Westport, where?
it's
West.
in West Fork, which is in Sedona, Arizona.
Oh, okay. It's a
Yeah,
section.
it's up the canyon.
Okay.
And that is a place that's very important to both of us, at least in my mind.
Okay. Yes.
In my
Yes.
mind.
Exactly. Exactly. Wow.
And
And
and I said to her, like, why me? Like, I felt very like I shouldn't have done it. Like, I had that problem a lot while I was writing this, and it was really her that kept me through. And she told me that's exactly why, to show what 2 women who share the same compassionate spirit can accomplish when they come together.
wow.
And
Exactly.
that we're all the same white light of God coming onto the planet, and
Yes.
that its birth is basically a divine prism that separates us into all the colors of the soul, and that
Wow.
we rejoice about our differences when we're born, because we go back to that white light of God when we're gone. And
Right.
we begged to have, differences is what makes us happy.
Right.
We just have our own internal traumas that
Right.
create device, sort of division for us when it really doesn't have to be.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. Now, so give us you've mentioned briefly throughout the interview about the time frame that it took. I think you said it took maybe about 20 years. Can you give me an approximate year of start and stop?
Well, I think it started 20 years because I'm counting that as when I first came to Sedona.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it was Addie Mae, but when I was waking up one morning, and I heard a Black woman's voice, but I didn't take
Yes.
anything of it. And I don't remember what she said, but I remember in the sentence and it was an innocuous sentence like the sky is blue today. It wasn't like it. But in
Right.
that sentence, I understood everything about the universe. It was this big relief. And as I came out of it, I forgot everything. Like it was all gone. But it was there for the split second. And I really feel that was kind of the beginning for me. And I started sort of feeling her, but I didn't know it was her, if that makes any sense. Like I felt the
Mm-hmm.
presence, but I
Mm-hmm.
didn't know who it was. And then
Wow.
when she finally started speaking to me, it took me, like I said, it took me 2 years to, and that was probably 10, like 5 or 10 years before that.
Wow.
And I was on a very deep spiritual path at that point. I mean, I think one of the reasons why she was able to access me was that, and I write this in the book too, that I had done so much work on myself to
Mm-hmm.
clear a lot that I
Yeah.
think she was fun. And I was open. I mean, you have to be
Right.
open. You have
Right.
to invite
Right.
in these energies, and you have to be clear enough so that you know that the energies that you're inviting in are here for your highest good,
Right.
and
Exactly.
come from the light. So I think I was, I think I think she had led me into the directions that
Yes.
would get me to that place, so that
Okay.
she was finally able to reach me.
Right.
And then the actual writing of the book, the 2 years of channeling, and then 8 years of editing, and then a
Mhm.
year and a half of self-publishing.
Right. Right.
And then, right as I was in the process of self-publishing, my mother fell and shattered her femur, and I
Oh,
went into 9 years of 24/7 care.
wow.
So I wasn't able to do much with the book in the beginning.
Mhm.
All I was able to do was enter a bunch of book awards because it didn't require anything except sending in
Right.
a thing. And it won
Right.
every book award that
Yes.
I sent it into. So that's why I said the whole process was like 20 years. And I feel that now, my mother passed 3 years ago,
Mhm.
and it took me a year to kind of come out of that coma. And I moved to Sedona March of last year in the middle of a pandemic. I finally got here. This has been my soul home.
Yes.
And so it's really for me, both in my timing in my life and also I think the timing in the world. I think we are ready as people are suffering more and questioning more and awakening more to their own power within themselves. I mean, we've given away so much of our power to others, to
Corporations, working nine to
corporations,
five, all of that.
everything, and we're told lies, and then what they do is they create situations to separate us so that they can
Yes.
control us easier. So
Yes.
what we have to do is, I mean, I'm a big believer in you have to do your own inner work, and yes, you need community around you, because you need to be doing it in a non-judgment way,
Right.
because we're all stumbling and bubbling. Humanity is messy. Life
Right.
is messy,
Yes. Yes.
and
Yes.
we're all whacked out. And,
Yes.
once we realize that we're all doing the best we can,
Right.
and the ones that are willing to do the work, and the ones that are
Right.
willing to say, okay, I want to see where my dark spots are. I want to be able to experience them and witness them and allow them to come up so that I can be released from them. And then
Right.
I don't have to go through that anymore. I mean, we end up attracting the same awful people to us unless we clear out that thing within us that brings them to us. And
Right.
Addie Mae was, I mean, she was a huge teacher for me on this. I mean, she
Wow.
really brought me into some pretty dark places that I
Oh,
had to face myself.
wow.
Um, and when you're in those dark places, and my dark night of the soul is not an easy thing to be in. And
No.
you can have all these people around you and all the support around you, but it is something you must go through alone.
Yes.
It is a
This
it
is
is a
very
process, and once you realize it's a process, you can do a bunch of things to sort of help yourself through that process, but no one's going to get you out of it.
right.
And Addie Mae stood just held space for me while I was going through mine.
Wow.
And I have felt her presence um, when I'm at my lowest.
Mm-hmm.
She has a tendency to laugh at me. she she finds fear hysterical.
Oh, wow.
She
Wow.
finds our fear very funny,
Wow.
because I think whenever we go, wherever we go, we will see that the fear that we had was not ever real, and that we basically are being bombarded with fear messages, and then it
Okay.
triggers our own internal life, because we've all struggled with childhood issues and ancestral issues. I mean,
Yes. And some
ancestral
people
issues.
don't realize.
Oh my
You know,
God, they don't know. Yeah.
well, there's a, again, I don't want to get off on on a tangent or anything, but a lot of times, and it wasn't until the racial reckoning of last summer that
Hmm.
really brought up a lot of things for me. So even with Black people, we discovered X, Y, and Z about ourselves, and we have a lot of generational trauma,
Unbelievable.
SD, from having enslaved relatives, even
Exactly.
though, and this is what I think people are trying to share with, say, as the term white people, is the fact that, well, maybe your ancestors, maybe you are not responsible for enslaved people. You may not be, but you are going to have to come to terms with saying, and being a little bit more contrite and helpful to help all of us move forward. We're going to all have to work together to move forward with this whole thing. We cannot continue to go on as we have with this racial division.
We have to come together. We have no
It's,
differences.
it's,
And that's what Addie Mae told me. We want to be different. Like,
yes,
you being Black and me being white is a good thing.
it's a good thing. It's not, and appreciate everybody's differences and culture. It does not have to be a race. It does not have to be a competition or anything like that. It doesn't have to be holding people back and down. It's unnecessary,
No.
and it deletes from the true reasons of why you should be here. Now, just real quick, I want to show the cover of the book here,
Thank
which is
you.
a beautiful book.
Thank you.
And we will also have, there will be some pictures of the book also on the recording. But there's a beautiful, is that a dragonfly, right?
It's the dragonfly. The dragonfly represents, well, the dragonfly in Native American culture and totem, it's a totem of transformation and seeing through illusion.
Yes.
It's to bring light in. And I didn't use it for that reason. I used it because it's the icon for it, for Addie Mae. Because as
Yes.
I was, and if you, when you read the book, you'll see why she becomes the icon for the dragonfly. But it came to me when I was sitting in the creek one day, and a
Mhm.
dragonfly came up to me and it flew in front of my face. And I
Yes.
put my finger out and it landed on my finger. And I
Yes.
just had this sort of mystical experience with it. And then the next morning, the scene about, and this is what happened to me a lot, I'd have an experience, and the next morning, Addie Mae would give me a scene that involved that experience from the night before. So the
Wow.
dragonfly came into her life and showed her, it was the beginning of her realizing that she wasn't like everyone else in her town, that she
Yes.
was ready to embrace her individuality, because she was with this guy who was a
Yeah.
water bug, and that was a nice guy, but he wasn't her. So
Right.
she was a dragonfly because she had wings to fly, and she could see the world in different ways that he couldn't. So that
Wow.
became a big shift for her in her perceptions of the expectations for her life. And a lot of this book is about um, allowing others' expectations of you to disappear so you can become who you truly are.
Right, right, right. Wonderful. Well, one of the things, and you mentioned this briefly, of a first time writer of a whole different genre, and the genre is what did I read? The genre is like not just spiritual, but it was called
Well, it's called a couple different things. Again, like this book defies everything. And so I've won a bunch of awards in visionary fiction,
okay.
but it just won an award in inspirational fiction. And it was an Amazon bestseller in inspirational fiction. So it's
Inspiration. That's the word I couldn't think.
yeah, it's been and I always called it, and it could be called spiritual fiction. I mean, it's sort of, it doesn't fit into a traditional publishing genre. I mean,
Right.
inspirational fiction is not, visionary fiction is not, spiritual fiction is not. So it really is. And when I was first writing it and I was trying to figure out what it was, I always called it conscious fiction, because what it
Yes.
does is it elevates consciousness. It allows you to tap into your own deepest parts of your consciousness. So it
Right.
awakens parts of you.
Wow, that's incredible. And so with that, and I'm just reading this card here again for a first-time writer of a novel in a totally new genre. You've got a review from Kirkus Reviews. Your Goodreads is off the charts. I read some woman was giving you a Goodreads review, and she was like, "I was just simply given this book. I don't know if
That
she
happens
wanted
a
a
lot.
giveaway
Yeah.
or what." And she was like, "And it changed my life." And I was like, "Oh my goodness!" And your average is 4.5 stars on Goodreads.
Yeah. And it's 4.7 on Amazon. And I just got a recently, the reviews, I mean, the awards have been great, and the
Yes.
book club has been really supportive too, which is really odd because they never pick indie published authors. And as a white woman, to be inducted into the Black Stories and Experience category, I was
Yes.
just, I mean, I literally
Yes.
cried when I, when I heard them tell
Yes.
me that.
Well, and then you got validation from the North Carolina poet laureate
She
Jackie Schultz
is,
Green.
she gave me a ridiculous review. I mean, it was
Yeah.
so, I mean, it's poetic. I mean, it's just,
Yes.
and she's been an amazing supporter, and I've never met her.
Oh
Um,
wow.
I've never met her. And the funny thing was, when I sent her the book out of the blue, I didn't know she was Black.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And so, because someone had introduced me and said, would you mind reading my friend's book? And she said, fine. And after she read it and she contacted me and said, this is amazing, I love it. I said, I said, I really would like to get it to some Black authors. Do you know anyone? She said, Lynnda, I am Black. I went, oh my God, Jackie, I'm so sorry. So now we've become very close, and she is, and her, by the way, her books, if you're looking to read amazing poetry, Jackie
Yes.
Shelton Green, who is the current poet laureate of North Carolina,
Yes.
is an amazing poet for the Black community and for any community. But she just writes with such a sense of ancestry.
Yes, yes, yes. Well, I hope to talk to her soon myself.
Yeah, you should. You'll
Yes,
love
yes, yes,
her.
yes. So I hope to do that very, very soon. Well, now, Lynnda, what's next for you? Are there any more books in the works? Where do you go from here?
Well, that's I'm trying to figure that out too. I mean, it was the 9 years of caring for my mother really kind of
Yeah.
eviscerated my past life. And I feel like that's whatever I did in the past is sort of over. I have right now skills and experiences and knowledge and wisdom. And I'm kind of going into my sage years. I'm going into my years of wisdom and knowledge and experience that I would like to share as we continue to go through this global transformation, which is
Yes.
probably going to get worse before it gets better. So we
Yes.
really need to help people
Yes.
hold themselves and know themselves so that they don't get pulled off by pulled away by the media and by hatred and by
Right.
everything, but help
Right.
people gather together. So
Right.
I mean, I've been working in consciousness for a long time, so I work now as a consciousness doula. And I called it that
Yes.
because I really feel like I'm helping people birth consciousness, and
Yeah.
to awaken to a higher part of themselves and to a more expansive sense of the world, that we're not just what our cultures have told us we are, but we're way more than that. And
Yes.
I'm working on that. I want to speak more because I feel like after 67 years of life,
Yes.
and I have had an enormous amount of experience, and I've gone through the dark night of the soul. So anyone who is going through that, I understand that space, and I am beginning to work on a couple other books, but I haven't
Mhm.
really been able to. The whole pandemic, as many people have, it's kind of whacked me out. Plus, I made a move from
Mhm.
New York City, where I lived for 35 years. I gave
Right.
away 90% of everything I owned and came here
Wow.
with 4 suitcases in the middle of the pandemic. So I'm just beginning now to come out of that and to sort of socialize again, and
Yes.
and
Yes.
and begin. I think I'm beginning to find. I was always extremely shy.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I know, but I was always extremely shy. I didn't speak for most of my life. I stuttered until
Oh,
my late 20s and
oh,
early
man.
30s. I was a big stutterer. So I'm a late bloomer, and I'm just beginning to come into my work now, I think, in the world. And I would really like to help everyone
Yeah.
who, needs guidance, because as we go through this, that we're going to be going through for the next few years, we need to
Yes.
hold on to our hearts. I'm all about holding people into their hearts. We need to
Right.
get people out of their heads, into their hearts,
Yes.
communicating through their hearts, dealing
Yeah.
with their trauma in a safe, non-judgmental space. Because
Right.
when trauma starts coming first out of you, it's
Mhm.
going to be all wacky.
Yes.
And if I react to your trauma with my trauma, that's
Right.
where the problems begin. But I have to
Yes.
allow you to bang around in your belief systems for a
Right.
while,
Right.
until you realize that you're safe, and
Exactly.
then we can start having a conversation, and then we can go. So, I mean, I want to start working with people. I want to start working with organizations. I want my book to get out there in the world. I mean,
Mhm.
my dream for my book has always been to have it made into a movie and have
Yes.
a crew of Black and white women bring it to fruition.
Wow.
That is
That
my dream,
sounds
because I
powerful.
I really want to show that women, Black and white women, can come together, because again, a lot of messaging tries to separate us,
Yes, most definitely.
but it's really not the truth. because
Yes.
as women, we share a lot of the same struggles.
Most definitely.
But if they can keep us separated,
Right.
good for them.
Right. Exactly.
But if
Exactly.
but if we start doing things together and
Yes.
start building businesses together and support
Yeah.
each other, and
Right.
then I mean, my one of my sort of power things is called a power of the purse, because
Okay.
women in general, they basically influence 80% of purchasing decisions in this country.
Yes, that's correct.
And if women would come together, black and white, Asian American, Native American
Right.
women would come together and say, okay, you 5 companies that are doing bad
Yes.
by the family and by
Right.
women, we're going to stop
Right.
buying from you.
Exactly.
That
Oh, that would be
it
incredible.
would be over. It would be
Yes.
over. But
Yes.
we have to have the state of consciousness that allows us to not listen to the voices of dissent,
Exactly.
and open our hearts to each other. And so I feel that is part of what I want to do going forward. And I do have books I want to write, but uh, right now I really feel like Trusting the Currents is the book I want to get out to as many people as possible, because
Right.
it does open the heart up and it will connect. And then I want to have conversations. I've had amazing conversations with, I love when mothers and teenage daughters read this book together,
Oh,
because
wow.
it
That's
it has so many messages of self-respect,
yeah.
and being your own person in the face of
Yeah.
other people deciding who you are. That
Hmm.
it's been really great. And it's been really great for book clubs, because when book clubs read it together, it's amazing how they find things out about each other that they never found out,
Oh my
because
goodness.
they open their hearts. you know
Yes.
they
Yes.
open their hearts about, oh, this is about me. And I've no one knows that they had been going through that before, because we hide our vulnerabilities.
Yeah, we do. We do. We hide a lot of things. We
Yeah.
do. Well, Lynnda, how can our listeners find your book, find you? What's your social media handles? Where are you and where is this book?
Well, I have a website, lindapollio.com, which is
Okay.
basically about the book. I'm in the process. I'm hoping to have a new website by the first quarter of next year, because I'm evolving as everyone else is.
Yeah.
I believe that we are literally all in the process of becoming something unexpected.
Oh,
S-
yeah.
So we're all moving in. Like, I never would have thought I'd be doing this, but here I
Right.
am.
Right. Right.
And
Right.
so I'm building a new website. So, but I have a website, lindapollio.com. The
Okay.
book is on Amazon,
Yes.
and the book is on other e-sites like iTunes and barnesandnoble.com, and I think Kobo. And I'm on Instagram, and I'm on Facebook, and I'm on Goodreads,
Yes. The
and
right.
I'm on
Definitely good.
Twitter. So I'm
Okay.
on all those.
Okay.
Because of supporting the book. If it wasn't for Addie Mae, I wouldn't be on any of them.
Wow.
She's,
Wow. Well, thank goodness for Addie Mae, and thank
oh
you
my God,
so
she's
much,
amazing. And
Lynnda.
I look forward to you reading it and letting me know whether you communicate to Addie. Addie Mae communicates to people, and Mary Mina, not everyone, but she will talk to people that are like, I don't know, she picks people.
Wow. Well, I am going to read this story. I've already started reading the story. I'm quite fascinated, as I hope the listeners will be fascinated too, and pick up that book on Amazon and on other sites, as you mentioned. And we will have that information also in the show notes
Oh,
below.
good. And the
So
book
that
is
would be great.
99 cents for the next through the weekend. I have the
Yes.
book. The ebook is 99 cents.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so
That's
I put it on ebook sale because of your event.
wonderful.
So for your listeners, so it'll be through the weekend. If anybody wants it longer, just let me know, and I can leave it on for a few
Okay.
more days.
All
Um,
right.
but yeah, but
That sounds
I really
wonderful.
appreciate I really appreciate you having me on, and I appreciate your listeners allowing me to speak and listening.
Well, thank you so much, Lynnda. And I just look forward to reading this. And thank you for reaching down into your heart and listening to the spirit and bringing forth this story.
Thank you
Thank
very much. I appreciate it.
And so I hope you enjoyed that interview with Lynnda Pollio. Again, the book is called Trusting the Currents. It is a transformational story. I think all who read it will be moved in some way about the book and about their very lives. So give it a try. As we spoke, a lot of times people fear reaching into themselves, but maybe this is a great first step. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this interview, and stay tuned for more interviews. We've got more coming. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at truebookaholic1, Instagram and Facebook at truebookaholic. The website is bookaholic.com. That's book-a-holic.com. And just stay tuned. I am on Google Podcast, Spotify, Apple, and anywhere else you may be listening to your podcast. And I also have a YouTube channel, Bookaholic-Deirdre Pippins. And so you can reach out to me at any time at readingjunkie@gmail.com. Okay, we will talk to you soon in another interview. Have a fantastic day.
Thank you for joining the Bookaholic podcast. We appreciate your support. Remember to subscribe to the podcast, follow us on Instagram at truebookaholic. You can also email us at readingjunkie@book-a-holic.com. Don't forget to support your local library and independent bookstores.